Some betrayals wear the mask of tragedy. Some look like cruel twists of fate. And some are calculated down to the last heartbeat. 24 hours after giving birth to her daughter, a young mother collapsed into a medical catastrophe so violent, so complete, that surgeons had no choice. Her hands and legs had to be amputated just to keep her heart beating. The diagnosis seemed clear: a rare, explosive postpartum infection. One of those nightmares that medicine can't always predict or prevent. Her husband agreed, nodding solemnly as doctors explained the inexplicable. He seemed devastated, asking all the right questions, almost too rehearsed, almost too calm. For weeks, the medical team couldn't shake the feeling that something didn't fit. The labs didn't match the story. The timeline felt wrong, until a forensic toxicologist found a compound that shouldn't exist in any hospital record. A synthetic poison designed to mimic exactly what everyone thought killed her. A poison that revealed this wasn't a medical mystery at all. It was attempted murder. Welcome to Cold Trail. Thanks to all my viewers and subscribers for your support. Stay tuned for daily true crime updates. Don't forget to subscribe. Haley Richardson grew up in a modest neighborhood on the outskirts of Charleston, South Carolina, where front porches were for evening conversations and neighbors still borrowed cups of sugar. She was the middle child in a tight-knit family, raised by parents who believed in hard work, Sunday dinners, and the power of education. Her father managed a local hardware store. Her mother worked as a nurse at the county hospital. And their home was the kind of place where the refrigerator was covered in report cards and the door was always unlocked for family. Haley inherited her mother's gentle empathy and her father's quiet determination, traits that made her beloved at the elementary school where she worked as a librarian. She wasn't the type to command a room or chase the spotlight. She was steady. The friend who remembered your birthday. The colleague who organized the staff potluck. The daughter who visited home every other weekend without fail. She loved classic novels, lavender tea, and the idea of building a life rooted in simple, enduring joys. Haley met Lucas Richardson at a charity fundraiser in downtown Charleston, the kind of event where string quartets played and wine flowed freely. He was magnetic in the way that certain men are, the type who could make you feel like the only person in the room even when 50 others surrounded him. He worked as a financial analyst at a mid-sized investment firm. Always impeccably dressed. Always with a story about his latest success. Within 6 months, they were engaged. Within a year, married. To everyone who knew them, they were the picture of upward mobility. Lucas drove a leased BMW. They rented a renovated townhouse in a gentrifying neighborhood. He talked about portfolio diversification and market opportunities with the confidence of someone who had cracked some secret code. Haley's friends envied her. Her parents approved. Even her mother, who'd been skeptical at first, softened when Lucas remembered her birthday without prompting. But there were moments. Small fractures Haley learned to ignore. The way Lucas's mood could pivot from charm to cold irritation if she questioned a purchase. How he'd disappear into his home office for hours, door locked, phone calls conducted in hushed, urgent tones. Once, she'd glimpsed a credit card statement, showing a balance that made her stomach drop. When she asked, Lucas laughed it off as a temporary cash flow issue, kissed her forehead, and promised everything was under control. She believed him. That was her weakness. Haley had been raised to see the best in people, to trust that love could smooth over any rough edge. So when Lucas said he had it handled, she let it go. She had no idea he was drowning in $180,000 of debt from cryptocurrency speculation and margin calls. Debts he'd hidden in accounts she didn't know existed. The collapse came in March, 3 weeks before Haley's due date. Lucas had leveraged everything on a biotech stock tip from a contact who swore it was a sure thing. A pre-FDA approval play that would triple their money in 60 days. Instead, the company's trial data came back catastrophic. The stock cratered. Overnight, Lucas lost $47,000 he didn't have. The margin calls started immediately. Collection agencies began circling. The walls were closing in. He sat in his car outside the townhouse for an hour that night, hands shaking, throat tight. Then he opened his laptop and logged into the insurance portal. The policy was there, exactly as he remembered. He'd taken it out 8 months earlier, right after Haley announced the pregnancy, framing it as responsible planning for their growing family. She'd signed the forms without reading them closely, trusting his judgment. $1.5 million. Beneficiary: Lucas Richardson. The idea crept in slowly at first, then consumed him. That night, after Haley fell asleep, Lucas opened a Tor browser on a burner laptop he kept hidden in his trunk. He started searching. Not murder, nothing that crude. He searched for compounds that mimicked natural medical crises, postpartum complications, septic shock, disseminated intravascular coagulation. He read medical journals, forensic toxicology case studies, message boards where amateur biochemists traded information that skirted legality. He found exactly what he needed: a synthetic biotoxin that triggered vascular collapse indistinguishable from overwhelming infection. Something that would look like tragedy, not crime. Something that would set them both free, in very different ways. The forum was called SynthSource, buried 3 layers deep in the dark web, accessible only through encrypted referrals. Lucas had spent 2 weeks gaining entry, proving he wasn't law enforcement by providing credentials stolen from his firm's research access. The marketplace operated like any other e-commerce site, except the products were illegal and the currency was cryptocurrency. He found the listing under Research Chemicals: Sanguinex, Vascular Disruptor, mimics septic cascade, undetectable by standard hospital panels. 5 milliliters, $12,000 in Bitcoin. He made the purchase on a library computer 40 miles from home, routing the transaction through 3 digital wallets. The package arrived 10 days later in unmarked packaging at a P.O. box he'd rented under a fake name. Lucas stored it in his office safe, waiting for the right moment, the window when suspicion would be lowest. That moment came the day after Haley gave birth to Lily. When mother and daughter came home from the hospital, exhausted and glowing, Lucas was the perfect husband, attentive and gentle, bringing water and pillows, dimming lights, whispering about how proud he was. Meanwhile, 300 miles away, Dr. Ava Morales was finishing a seminar on digital forensics in poison cases. She was a detective with the South Carolina State Law Enforcement Division, a specialist who'd built her reputation tracking crimes that existed at the intersection of technology and chemistry. Her phone didn't ring that night, but it would. Because 23 hours later, Haley Richardson would collapse in her bedroom, her body betraying her in ways that would demand answers. And Morales was very good at finding answers no one else could see. The homecoming should have been perfect. Haley settled into the nursery rocker with Lily swaddled against her chest, breathing in that newborn smell that made everything else disappear. Lucas moved through the house with practiced efficiency, unpacking hospital bags, adjusting the thermostat, speaking in those soft, reverent tones people use around new mothers and sleeping infants. Around 9 that evening, he appeared in the doorway holding a mug. "I made you that herbal tea your mom recommended," he said, smiling. "The one that's supposed to help with recovery and milk production." Haley took it gratefully. She was exhausted down to her bones, her body still processing the trauma of labor. The tea was warm and slightly sweet, with undertones of chamomile and something earthy she couldn't quite place. She drank it all. Lucas kissed her forehead and disappeared into his office. What Haley didn't see was him opening the control panel for their smart home security system. The cameras they'd installed 6 months earlier after a string of neighborhood break-ins. He disabled each feed systematically, creating a 3-hour blind spot. When Haley asked about it later through the baby monitor, he called back that he'd turned them off to protect Lily's privacy, that he didn't want footage of their infant daughter stored on some company's cloud server where it could be hacked or leaked. It sounded reasonable. Everything Lucas said always sounded reasonable. That was his gift. The ability to make the calculated seem spontaneous, the sinister seem thoughtful, Haley heard his explanation and felt grateful she'd married someone so protective. She had no idea she'd just swallowed 5 milliliters of synthetic death, or that the clock was already counting down. Haley woke at 4:47 a.m., not to Lily's cries but to her own body screaming. Her hands felt wrong, distant, like they belonged to someone else. When she tried to lift them, they wouldn't respond properly. Her legs were ice cold despite the blankets. Panic flooded her system. She tried to call for Lucas, but her voice came out, strangled, weak. He found her seizing in the bed, eyes rolled back, skin mottled with purple bruising that spread like spilled ink. He called 911, and his performance was flawless. The terrified husband, voice cracking with fear, begging the dispatcher to hurry. The ambulance arrived within 9 minutes. At Charleston Memorial, the emergency team worked with controlled chaos. Haley's blood pressure was crashing. Her organs were failing in sequence. Kidneys first, then liver, then heart struggling to maintain rhythm. Doctors threw every intervention at her. Fluids, vasopressors, broad-spectrum antibiotics for presumed sepsis. Nothing worked. Her extremities turned black as blood vessels collapsed and tissue began dying from lack of oxygen. Dr. Sarah Chen, the surgical lead, made the call at hour 16. If we don't amputate, she dies on this table. The team worked for 7 hours, removing both hands at the wrists and both legs below the knee, trying to stay ahead of the necrosis racing through her vascular system. When they finally wheeled Haley to the ICU, she was alive, but she was no longer whole. Lucas stood in the hallway, watching through the glass, and the first question he asked the nurse was whether the hospital took insurance assignment of benefits. The nurse would remember that detail later. Dr. Rashid Al-Jaziri had practiced infectious disease medicine for 23 years, and something about Haley Richardson's case felt fundamentally wrong. The cultures came back negative. No bacteria, no fungal growth, no viral markers that would explain the catastrophic septic presentation. He stood in the lab at 2 a.m., staring at results that made no medical sense, and felt the cold finger of suspicion trace down his spine. He ordered a mass spectrometry toxicology screen, the kind of test most hospitals never run because it's expensive and rarely yields results. It analyzed blood samples at the molecular level, searching for compounds that standard panels would miss entirely. The lab tech looked at him skeptically. "Doc, this test costs $4,000 and takes 5 days." Al-Jaziri didn't blink. "Run it. Mark it. Priority research." Meanwhile, Lucas played the devastated husband with methodical precision. He met with the hospital chaplain, accepting condolences with the right mixture of shock and stoicism. But the chaplain, Father Miguel Torres, left the conversation feeling unsettled. Most grieving spouses asked about recovery, about therapy, about how their partner would adapt. Lucas asked about disability insurance, about lawsuit liability, about whether the hospital's negligence could be proven. His eyes were dry. His questions were transactional. The nursing staff noticed too. Lucas never held Lily in Haley's ICU room. He never wept. He stood at appropriate distances, said appropriate things, but there was a quality of performance to it all, like an actor who'd memorized blocking but couldn't access genuine emotion. When Haley finally regained consciousness 3 days later, reaching for her daughter with arms that ended in bandages, Lucas wasn't in the room. He was in the parking lot, on his phone, checking Bitcoin prices. The toxicology report landed on Dr. Al-Jaziri's desk on a Tuesday morning, and he read it 3 times before he fully comprehended what he was seeing. Sanguinex, a synthetic biotoxin that wasn't supposed to exist outside of theoretical research papers and dark web mythology. He picked up the phone and called the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division before he called the hospital administrator. Within 2 hours, Detective Ava Morales was standing in his office, reading the report with the focused intensity of a predator who'd just caught a scent. "This wasn't postpartum complications," Al-Jaziri said quietly. "Someone poisoned her." Morales nodded slowly. Walk me through who had access to the victim in the critical window. The list was short. Family members, hospital staff with documented movements, and Lucas Richardson, who'd been alone with Haley for 3 hours after they returned home from the initial hospital discharge. Morales started with the money. Financial crimes left trails, and she was expert at following them. Within 48 hours, she'd subpoenaed Lucas's banking records, credit reports, and trading accounts. What she found was a man drowning in debt he'd hidden with sophisticated shell games, $180,000 in losses across cryptocurrency exchanges, margin accounts, and offshore gambling platforms. Then she found the insurance policy. $1.5 million, taken out 8 months prior, right when Haley would have been announcing her pregnancy. But money was motive, not method. Morales shifted her focus to digital forensics. She obtained Lucas's search history through a warrant to his internet service provider. The terms made her blood run cold. Postpartum sepsis causes, DIC symptoms, undetectable toxins, how to trigger vascular collapse. Each search was time-stamped, each one built toward the same horrifying conclusion. Lucas Richardson hadn't just wanted his wife dead, he'd researched exactly how to make it look like natural causes. Morales assembled a task force, 2 digital forensic specialists, an FBI liaison experienced in dark web investigations, and a prosecutor who specialized in attempted homicide. They worked in a converted conference room, walls covered in timeline charts and evidence photos, the air thick with coffee and grim determination. The breakthrough came when they traced Lucas's internet traffic through a series of proxy servers and encrypted relays. The forensics team found a pattern: connections to a Tor network originating from the public library in Somerville, 40 miles from the Richardson home. Security footage from the library showed Lucas on 3 separate occasions, always using computers in the back corner, always paying cash for printing services, never making eye contact with staff. They followed the digital breadcrumbs deeper. The team identified the SynthSource marketplace and, through cooperation with federal cybercrime units, accessed transaction logs. There it was. A Bitcoin payment of $12,000. Routing codes that led back to wallets Lucas had funded through a privacy-focused exchange. The purchase date was 3 weeks before Haley gave birth. Then Morales found something even more damning. Lucas's home security system had cloud backups of its own system logs, separate from the video feeds he'd disabled. The log showed a manual override executed at 9:17 p.m. on the night Haley was poisoned, with a calendar synced to his phone, labeled System Maintenance. It was scheduled for exactly the window when he would have administered the toxin. But Morales wanted more than digital evidence. She wanted human corroboration. Background checks revealed Lucas had been having an affair with Charlotte Hayes, a woman he'd met at an underground poker game. When Morales showed up at Charlotte's apartment with 2 uniformed officers, Charlotte's resolve lasted approximately 15 minutes. Under pressure, she admitted Lucas had talked about being financially trapped and needing a clean exit strategy. He'd never said the words outright, but the implication was clear enough that Charlotte had stopped seeing him 2 months before Haley's collapse. Terrified of what he might be planning, they brought Lucas in on a Thursday afternoon, walking him through the SLED headquarters lobby in handcuffs, while office workers stopped to stare. Morales let him sit in the interrogation room for 40 minutes, watching him through the one-way glass. He didn't fidget, didn't pace, just sat with his hands folded, face neutral, like he was waiting for a dentist appointment. When Morales finally entered, she carried a thick folder and a laptop. She sat across from Lucas and smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. Richardson, we need to talk about what happened to your wife." Lucas leaned back, projecting calm. "I've told everyone everything I know. Haley had a terrible reaction after giving birth. It's been devastating for our family." Morales opened the folder. "Let's talk about your financial situation. You're currently $180,000 in debt from high-risk investments in cryptocurrency speculation. You've been receiving collection notices for 7 months. 3 weeks before your wife collapsed, You maxed out your final line of credit. She slid documents across the table, one by one. Lucas's face remained impassive, but Morales saw his jaw tighten. Now let's talk about this. She turned the laptop toward him, showing the dark web transaction log. That's your Bitcoin wallet. That's the purchase of Sanguinex, a biotoxin that causes symptoms identical to what Haley experienced. And this, she pulled up another screen, is the security system log showing you manually disabled your home cameras for exactly 3 hours the night she was poisoned. Lucas's composure cracked. That's circumstantial. You can't prove. I can prove all of it. Morales's voice turned to steel. Your girlfriend Charlotte gave a statement. Your search history reads like a murder manual. The toxicology report is conclusive. You poisoned your wife for insurance money. Lucas, you tried to murder the mother of your child. Something broke in him then. The mask shattered. Lucas lunged across the table, screaming that Haley had ruined everything, that the debt was her fault for wanting a bigger house and a better life, that he'd had no choice. 2 officers rushed in and wrestled him back into his chair while Morales stood calmly, watching him destroy himself with every word. Lucas Richardson, she said quietly, you're under arrest for attempted first-degree murder. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The prosecution presented the financial evidence, the digital forensics, Charlotte's testimony, and Dr. Al-Jaziri's expert analysis of how Sanguinex had mimicked septic shock. The defense argued reasonable doubt, claimed the toxin could have been contamination, suggested alternative explanations that grew more desperate as the evidence mounted. The jury deliberated for 4 hours, guilty on all counts. Attempted first-degree murder, aggravated assault, insurance fraud. The judge, a silver-haired woman named Patricia Hendricks who'd presided over criminal cases for 26 years, didn't hesitate with sentencing. Mr. Richardson, you researched, planned, and executed the attempted murder of your wife while she was at her most vulnerable, hours after giving birth to your daughter. You showed no remorse, only calculation. The court sentences you to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Lucas showed no emotion as they led him away. He'd retreated back into that cold, controlled performance. But this time it didn't matter. The door closed behind him with a metallic finality. 1 year later, Haley Richardson stood in her townhouse kitchen, using high-tech prosthetic arms to lift Lily into a high chair. The prosthetics were remarkable, responsive to neural signals, capable of delicate movements. She'd spent months in physical therapy, relearning everything: how to hold a fork, how to button clothes, how to cradle her daughter. Lily reached for her mother's face with chubby toddler hands, giggling. Haley felt tears slide down her cheeks, but they weren't tears of grief anymore. She'd survived. More than that, she'd reclaimed her life from the man who tried to erase it. She spoke at survivor conferences now, advocating for victims of intimate partner violence, telling her story not as tragedy but as testament to human resilience. Lucas had taken her hands and legs, thinking he could take everything. He'd been wrong. The parts of Haley that mattered most, her spirit, her love, her unbreakable will to live, those were things no one could amputate. She was still here. She was still whole. And every day she woke up and chose joy was another day she proved that survival could look like victory.